So the rangefinder is probably the most complex of the rangefinders you're going to strike on any of the Retina cameras. We have your usual swinging arm arrangement for your rangefinder. We have a parallax correction here, which shifts the frame in the finder according to the focus distance. And then apart from that, we have a frame selector that selects the appropriate frame depending on the type of lens you've got fitted. So it's quite complex, lots of things to watch for, but what I'm most concerned in this case is cleaning it. We've got a front surface silvered mirror here, so don't keep your fingers off that and don't touch it with anything like a cotton bud, it'll scratch. Glass lens on the front, glass lens on the back, those lenses can be cleaned easily. Here we have a semi-silvered mirror. The front surface, the surface exposed here, the surface pointing to the front of the camera, that's just glass. You can clean that with anything you like. The rear surface, the surface facing the eyepiece, that's silvered. Don't touch it, you'll wipe the silver off it. You wipe the silver off it, you won't have a good rangefinder image. Let's start disassembling this stuff. We'll start by removing that screw and taking the arm off. So I want my pin spanner. Just loosen that. And I should have a better pair of tweezers than this one, but this will do. Here's the screw, the familiar wavy washer, and the familiar brass bush. Now that brass bush, I'll put a little mark across that so that it goes back in the same relative position. And that way I'm less likely to need to do too many adjustments. So this surface here, that'll need to be cleaned. That's got some old grease on it, looks a bit sticky. So that'll be cleaned with naphtha. Same here. The glass lens just cleaned with glass cleaner on a cotton bud. Easy stuff. The body. Okay. Well, here we want the eyepiece glass off for a start. So we've got a single screw here holding that frame in place. And there's the glass. Now that's pretty much flat on the outside, it's convex on the inside. The surface going inwards is convex. This arrangement for the frames, we want that out of there. There are two small screws, here and here, clamping that in place. This will be locked with a touch of lacquer too, quite probably. But that should come out. I'll take the arm off the bottom of here. Take that arm off. That's the one that couples to the rangefinder arm. Take this one off. These two screws control this arm, which selects the that does the parallax correction. Let's take that off. Now we can slide this piece out the front. Now this assembly has got the moving metal mask in it. It's got a piece of film with the frame lines on it. Now this is all riveted together. You can't get it apart, and you do not want to get it wet. Do not leave this in the rangefinder while you're putting it through the ultrasonic cleaner, because if you do, that film the surface of it, the emulsion will break up and then you'll have ruined it completely. There's no fixing that. I'm just making sure that all these movements here move freely. There's a bit of graphite grease around on here and I think it's a little bit dried out. So I may remove those screws and clean that, but I'll do that manually. The rangefinder body that we see here, be careful of that spring there that resets what's that reset? Oh, that's the frame, selecting your frames for your various lenses. That's what pushes it down. That's its detent. This, I just want to clean this with a bit of naphtha. I want to get rid of that grease that's there before I put this in the cleaner. So otherwise it'll just poison my water really. It'll just mean that there's grease floating around in the water, and that grease in turn will do its best to settle on the glass surfaces that I'm busy trying to clean. So any grease that's on here, I want that off now before I start cleaning this in the ultrasonic. So it was greasy in there where that arm slid along, and it's greasy on this surface where the main arm went. I'm just checking. I think that's it. There'll be some on the spring. I'll wipe that. And anything on the body. It's got someone's signature on there from when that was serviced on previous occasion. Some people are very enthusiastic to leave their signature behind in cameras. One bloke was, he was legendary for it, George Morris. If you ever get hold of a camera that he's serviced, it has his initials all over it and all through it. Right, so that's ready for the ultrasonic cleaner. Now how do I go about cleaning something like that? Well, that goes into a small drinking glass with hot water and a drop of normal domestic dish soap, and that glass gets suspended in the ultrasonic cleaner, surrounded by water of course. And the ultrasonic, the waves basically pass through the glass and into the solution on the inside, and that'll clean all this all off. It'll clean those glass surfaces. You can see how dirty that surface is there. A lot of that's dust. At least 50%, probably 75% of it's on this front surface, the one that you could clean with a cotton bud. I'll have a go at wiping that now and see how much of a difference it makes to that. I've got some glass cleaner here. If you haven't got an ultrasonic cleaner, you may want to do a minimally invasive clean, and that would mean cleaning surfaces that are safe to clean manually like this and leaving everything else alone. Well, that surface now is absolutely clean and sparkly, and looking through it, I'll just have a peer through that at the light. I can see a speck of dust in there, but there's only a single noticeable speck. All of that filth was on this outside surface here, and it was all, you could clean that away quite easily without any damage at all. This front surface silvered mirror here, I'll try and get that in the light. Yeah, see it's got dust and stuff on it. I'll try blowing that off. But what I would do if I wasn't going through the ultrasonic, I'd just try blowing that off. I wouldn't touch it with anything else. But the ultrasonic should just blow off that loose dust. Now, ultrasonic cleaners. You never want to overdo things like this. This is only going to get 3 minutes in the ultrasonic cleaner. Even that's possibly pushing your luck. If you get a front surface silvered mirror like that, or one that looks worse than that, one that's quite dirty looking, chances are the silver's damaged. Don't keep cleaning it in the hope that you're cleaning some dirt off it. You're probably not cleaning dirt off it. All you'll end up doing is cleaning silver off it until it becomes absolutely useless. So front surface silvered mirrors, that silver is a very, very thin coating and it's pretty vulnerable. So don't get carried away with the cleaning. Do a minimal amount. What you're wanting to achieve is to lift off any film of oily film or haze that's on the surface. That's as much as you can hope to achieve. You can't restore missing silver by putting it in an ultrasonic cleaner. Right, that's to the cleaner, and I'll be back and clean up the rest of the stuff manually. Okay, I'm back. My front surface mirror is nice and sparkly. That dust and rubbish lifted straight off it. The semi-silvered mirror similarly. That little speck of dust that I saw in it, that's long gone. That looks nice and clean. Everything here is good. So that's ready for reassembly. I'll pop that to one side. We can start with this arm here, I think. First of all, I need to use some naphtha and remove all the traces of old grease from this thing. And the main reason you're removing the old grease is it's probably lost a lot of its lubricant properties and dried out and gone sticky, but it'll also have gathered up dust and changed from being a lubricant to being a grinding compound. Okay, I'll clean that glass, and I'll do that with a cotton bud and some glass cleaner. I'm cleaning the outside surface first because that's easiest to see, and once you've got that cleaned it's easier to tell what you're doing with the inside surface, which being concave it's not so easy to see how well you're doing with that. But now I can look through it and see how I'm doing, and there's a mark on that glass. It's on the inside, it's up towards the top there, and it didn't go away. No, it's there to stay. I don't know what that is. That's alright, it's only a very minor mark, and that's only the viewfinder. You'd be lucky to even know that was there. So some of these other components. Well, here's the piece with our frame lines on it. I'm just going to clean this with some naphtha and a cotton bud, and I'm going to be careful not to get the naphtha anywhere near the film. I'm just interested in around these two screws here where the grease is, just to clean that excess away because it's doing nothing useful. And check that all moves smoothly. It appears to. Because this whole assembly moves back to its rest position, if you like, under the influence of that very fine spring. So it needs to move freely. I've got a little thread of cotton on here now, I'll make sure I get rid of that. Little threads of cotton are unfortunately one of the downfalls of using the likes of this when you're cleaning things. Alright, that all looks good. these pieces, I'll just clean these with some naphtha, and basically I just want to make sure that any grease that's on them is wiped off, because it's probably no longer doing its job properly. Okay, that'll do. That's enough for us, I think. Let's just give these pieces a wipe. And the rear eyepiece glass we'll need to put in too. Okay, so getting this stuff back in. Well, this lot just slides back into the body. To watch out for that spring, because it's fairly easily damaged, and the spring of course hooks onto the top of that little frame. There's a little V-shaped notch there that couples to. Now this frame here should come up level with those two arms. I'll just do those screws up lightly and check that that's sitting square. This seems to be sitting well. Let me look through the finder. Yeah, they all appear to be sitting square. That's good. And the spring's sitting there. And the spring should return that nicely to the rest position. You see that moves that back down quite promptly. Okay, so the levers. Let's get these back in place. And framed just about. Okay. I'm going to take a little bit of molybdenum paste. I'm going to give it a wipe through here in the slots. Same here in that closed slot. That's all. Just the slightest wipe. This lever, that pin, couples into this little hole in that bracket. We'll get the two screws in position and you'll be able to see how it couples and how it moves things. This is for the parallax correction. And this arm goes on here. Make sure those arms are free to move around the shoulder of the screw, not caught underneath the screw. Right, so you can see there how this is moved. This is moved by this post on the arm. It moves this piece in turn, and this piece moves our parallax correction. You see as I move it. Why is that not moving? Oh, I've got a jam with that thing, have I? As I move that, you'll see this whole thing move upwards and downwards. Why is it sticking? I don't know why it's not moving. I think it's my frame selector jamming that up, so that's not sitting in the correct position. Yeah, so that moves like that, and it moves this up and down. No, it's still sticking and I'm not sure why. I'll find out. Well, that problem did take some finding, and what it came down to was this. That the moving frames here, the whole arrangement, rose slightly too far up this way, which means it came out of its slot completely, and if you held it in just the right position, it didn't want to drop back in its slot. And the whole arrangement is quite loose. It's not held firmly in line. So it was just a matter of this reaching the end of its stroke, if you like, and it had lifted this completely out of the guide slots there and there. Now, why is it capable of doing that? I'm blowed if I know. It's not certainly not something that I've struck before as a problem. But the main thing is that moves up and down through its range correctly, reliably, every time. No hiccups, and that part is good. So, with that in place, I'm just going to lock this position here with a couple of spots of clear lacquer, as was done before. That'll just stop that from being able to shift out of position. Let's just gather some up here. Just a spot there and there. That's all that's required, and it's just to keep that that little clamp that holds everything in place from being able to move. None of this metal's particularly strong. Things bend out of shape quite easily. If you do the screws up too tight, you'll end up distorting things. So it's a bit of a balancing act. That little touch of lacquer is certainly what's required to keep things moving smoothly. So this part is all looking pretty good now. I think that really I could just about clean up the front arm, clean up the rear lens, and put those in place. Now that front glass, I've cleaned that, haven't I? So that's all ready to go. Right, let's get the arm in place. So what I'm going to do here is give us a wipe of molybdenum paste through the centre, a light wipe on that top surface. Let's take the brass bush, pop that into place. I've got my alignment mark there, so I know where it came from. I'll put a touch of molybdenum paste around the outside of that brass bush, because that's where the wavy washer will run. And we can put that on the rangefinder body. Now the rangefinder has this return spring. It's quite strong, and it runs through a little slot in the arm just here. So I've got to hook that spring through there, swing the arm around, line up the hole with the screw hole there. Can we see any of this? Yeah, you just about can. Get my wavy washer in position. Get the fixing screw in position. And run that down. If I can find the right tweezers. That looks good. I'll tighten that up with my pin spanner. Now this pin visible here couples to this arm here, so you've got to get those two lined up, which isn't hard. And you can see as the rangefinder arm moves in, it moves that arm, which moves this arm, which brings our parallax correction, raises the parallax correction, or allows it to drop back down. That part's looking good. I'll do this rear lens now, I think. I'll just clean that with some glass cleaner. Well, there's the glass cleaned and back in place. And its little retaining clip here needs to go in, which is held with a single screw. The glass is busy falling out. Let me just blow that dust off there. Okay, that should be my rangefinder complete, and I'm just going to peer out the window and see what the alignment of that is like. The vertical alignment's all over the place, and I'm wondering whether there's too much rattle in this arm. No, possibly not. We'll have to see what that looks like once it's on the camera. And I'll apply a touch of molybdenum paste to that wire there. That's better. Okay, that's ready to go back on the camera body. Now, getting the rangefinder back into a Retina IIIS can sometimes be a bit of a trial. You're trying to line two things up at once. You're trying to line up, get this connected behind the arm that moves it inside the camera body, and couple up a fork to this little lever here, which changes the frames. And between the two, it can be a bit awkward. The easiest way to get the rangefinder into the body is have it in this position and the arm fully pushed back. Now you'll notice that here there's a slot in the body and a screw hole. You can put a small screw in there to hold it firm in that position while you slide it into the camera body. And that's what I'll do. I'll just open up the top of the camera. I'm ready to put this rangefinder in place. Okay, so one thing I want to achieve here is I want to make sure that the rangefinder doesn't shift on the camera body, or has no enthusiasm to do so. So I'll put a couple of spots of lacquer on the rangefinder body so it won't shift. That'll just stop the rangefinder from having any enthusiasm to shift if the camera gets dropped. Right, so what have I got to do? The rangefinder arm acts on this point here. So the rangefinder arm has to be forward of that. So I've got to push the rangefinder arm forward. This fork here couples to this arm here. So I've got to get that in position. Of course, that spring's supposed to be sitting on top of that little piece there. Right, so with a bit of luck, I should be able to swing this in. And that fork has picked up that arm quite nicely, and my rangefinder, of course, I know I've got that That was correctly positioned, and this is held back against its spring at the moment. So I've got 2 fixing screws. I'll run them down. I'm going to drop the other one in from the top and hope that it lands in the right spot. You can see where it is from the front. It's just awkward to get at you. If it doesn't fall into the hole, it's awkward to reposition. That's okay, that appears good. Now I'll just hold the rangefinder down, tighten the 2 fixing screws, remove the small screw I put in here to lock that action. And now the rangefinder should move when the pin at the front here, watch this, see how that moves? And you'll see that not only does the lens move here across here to align our images, but the parallax correction is rising and falling here as well. And the collar on the outside of this pin works the frame finder, the frame selector, and you'll see that as I move that collar, you'll see the frame selector here moving. So that's all looking pretty promising. Of course, I don't know what its alignment would be like. I'll have to put a lens on there now and check that. The camera didn't come with a lens, but I'll find one here and use that.